In this video, we are going to look at the graphical user interface part of our Android application or program. Last time when we created our Hello World application, we started by creating an activity. And we said an activity is basically a one screen that you see in your app. So for example, when you open your app, the first screen that pops up, it's actually an activity. Each activity contains two components. The XML file, which is the graphical user interface that you see, which is the graphical component of your activity, and the Java file, which is the control component or the programmable component that controls the operations in your activity. So if you think of it as a car, the XML file or the graphical component, it's like the steering wheel in your car, and then the gears and hydraulics behind or under the hood in your car, this will be your Java file or your control component. We usually refer to that XML file as our layout file, and this layout file basically defines the structure for the user interface in your application. Each layout file will be built using a collection of views and view groups. A view is something that the user sees in the screen and interacts with, for example, like a button or a text view, and we usually refer to them as widgets. A view group will be a collection of these views, or even a collection of view groups, which will help you place these views in an organized fashion. So your application will look organized and visually appealing to the user. So a view group we usually refer to it as a layout too. And we have different types of these view groups, like a linear layout, constraint layout, which we'll be looking at in a bit. So if we look at a sample structure of a layout file, we will see that we have usually as a parent in our layout file, we will have a view group. In this view group, we can have multiple views, and even we can have another view group inside that structure. This view group might contain other views, and this will help me organize my views again in a visually appealing layout for the user. So let's go back to Android Studio and look at the activity that we created last time. This is our main activity. We said we have two files, the main activity.java and the activity_main.xml. If you already closed these files, you can find the activity_main.xml in the resources folder under the layout, and this is your file. You'll see here, this is the layout. This is what we will see on the screen in the phone when we launch this activity. In the left here, we have the component tree. The component tree shows you all the elements that you have in that layout file. We have the parent element here, which is a constraint layout, which is a view group. And inside it, we have a text view, which is a child view inside that constraint layout. You can add as many elements inside that constraint layout because this is a view group. So if I wanted to add another text view, I can drag it and drop it in here, and both of these elements will be inside that constraint view. You can also drag your elements directly to the screen. So if I dragged it here, it will also be added to this constraint layout. Now the reason we are dragging directly to the constraint layout because this constraint layout is filling the whole screen. If you check in the text component here, you will see that we have the constraint layout, which is our parent layout. It's filling the parent, which is our screen. So the width and the height for this layout is matching the parent, which is the full screen. So again, going back to our hierarchy, each layout file will have a parent view group, and inside that view group we'll have multiple views, and we can even also have other view groups inside that parent view group. In each view group, you usually have multiple views, and these views will belong to that parent view group, and this parent view group will belong to the original parent view group that fills out the whole screen. So how can we add these user interface components to our XML file? One way we saw is actually dragging and dropping these components in Android Studio. So if you wanted to add a button or a text view, just drag it and drop it in that screen. The other way is using the XML language. The XML is similar to HTML, where you have tags, and for each component you will have a set of attributes. And if you have a view group, for example, you can insert other components inside that view group, which will also be children to that view group. This will allow me, having these graphical user interface components done in XML will allow me to separate the presentation from the code that controls the behavior of my application. So as we mentioned now, Android's XML is basically similar to the HTML language that we use to create web pages. We have a series of nested elements. Each element starts and ends with an angular bracket. Each element will have a set of attributes, and these attributes will define the behavior and the look of that element. Now, as we said also, that each layout file must contain exactly one root element or a parent element. This root element could be a view or a view group object. We usually have that as a view group object, like the constraint layout we had in our example. Once you have defined that root element, you will start adding additional layout objects or widgets. These objects or widgets will be children to that parent element or root element, and that will build up your view hierarchy that will define your layout for that activity. So let's start exploring these view groups and views in Android Studio. So in here again, I have a constraint layout. This is my root view group, and inside it I have a child, which is my text view. If you click on that text view on this right menu, you will see all the attributes associated with that text view. The important attribute, the most important attribute, will be my ID. I will be using this ID to map that view and use it in my Java file. So to be able to control that view and use it in my Java file, I'll be using this ID to be able to locate it and uniquely identify it in my program. You will see some other attributes, for example, the width of that view, the height, and then some constraints that you will be adding to that view. Now, since we are in the constraint layout, these are the layout attributes that are related to that layout. So for the constraint layout, our attributes that are related to that layout are called constraint attributes. If you are using relative layout, you will have different types of attributes that will help you position your items. These constraint attributes will help you put constraints on your view to tell this view exactly where to go. So you'll see that we have one of the constraints. I'm going to expand that so you can see it. One of the constraint is called layout underscore constraint bottom. So where do you want to have this bottom of this view? Where do you want to put it in this layout? In here, I'm saying that this bottom of the view, I want it to be mapped to the bottom of the parent. Same thing with the top. I said I want to be mapping it or constraining it to the top of that parent. So since I'm constraining it with the top and the bottom of the parent, that will make it in the center. Now the reason it's mapping to the center because we have this height of this view as wrap content. If I change it to match the constraint, it will expand it. This was the width. It will expand it to the width of the parent. And same thing if we have it for the height, it will map it to the height of the parent. If you do it as wrap content, it will make that width, for example, in here, it will make it only to fit the contents of that view. Same thing with the height. If you do wrap content, it will make the size of that view to wrap it around the content of that view. So the constraint bottom, this is where the bottom of your view will be mapped to or constrained by the layout, and we are setting that to the parent. So the bottom of this view will be constrained to the bottom of that parent. The top of that view, we are assigning it to the top of the parent too. So that's why we have it now centered vertically. Same thing, we are doing it with the left, and with the right, we are centering it horizontally too. And that's why we have it in the center of that screen or layout. If I try to add another text view, for example, when I place it in here, I'm not adding any constraints yet. So you'll see we have this red exclamation point, which tells you that this view was not constrained. So when we try to run this application now or activity on the emulator, this view, because it was not constrained, it will jump automatically to the 0, 0 position, which is the top left corner in here. So let me run this application and see how it will position it. I'm gonna run it on an emulator. So this will start my emulator for me, and it will install this app, and we will see how it will look on our screen. So as you can see, the hello world, because we had the constraints, it was positioned in the center of the screen, but the text view that we added, because we did not have any constraints on it, it jumped automatically to the 0, 0 position, which is the top left corner of my screen. So let's add some constraints to that view. One way to add the constraints is you can actually click on one of these four edges or four locations in your view. So if you clicked on the top, that will create a top constraint, and then you can assign it or make it a constraint related to another view in your layout. So if I wanted to put it underneath the hello world, I want to put the top of that text view to align with the bottom of the hello world. So that will position it to the bottom of the hello world. If I want to align it to the center of the screen horizontally, I will assign the right to the right of this screen, and the left to assign it to the left of that view. If I want to center it according to the bottom too, I will assign it to the bottom of here, and that will put it in the center of between the hello world and the bottom of the screen. If I do not want to center it with the bottom of the screen, I can add some values in here. So I can add a specific value to be my bottom margin, so we can assign it closer to the hello world. Now notice that the red exclamation point is gone now, and we only have this caution, which tells me that the text view is hard-coded. The string that I have in the text view was hard-coded. We will leave it with this caution for now, and we'll talk later about it, how we can add a string value to our resources. But for now, let's leave it as a hard-coded value. Let's go ahead and run our application again. So I'm going to start the Android emulator, and you will see that we are reinstalling the application now, and you will see that the text view is now assigned between the hello world and the bottom of the screen, in the center between them. We are centering it horizontally, and it's centered between the hello world text view and the bottom of that screen. So let's go now and explore the XML code for this layout. So if you click on the text view here, you will see the actual XML code for the layout that we have, or the layout file that we have here. You'll see we have the parent component, which is a constraint layout. And inside that constraint layout, we have two text views. Notice that the text view starts with an angular bracket and ends with a / angular bracket, which means that this is the text view. Now, for the constraint layout, you will notice that we have components inside it, which are the two text views. So we are not closing the angular bracket with a /. Instead, we will close it after we added all the components. So we have the / in here as the closing bracket, or as the closing tag. So we have the angular bracket closing tag, which is the /, and the same tag we have for the constraint layout. You will see we have some attributes for that layout, which are the layout width and the height, which match the parent, which means that this layout will be filling that full screen. And since this is our root layout, it should fill our root or our screen. That's why we have it as a match parent. The first text view we have, this is the ID. It's called text view. We have the width, which is wrap content, the height, which is wrap content, the text, which is hello world, and then we have the constraints that we have on the position of that text view. You will see we have the bottom of that view aligned with the bottom of the parent. The left is aligned with the left of the parent. The right is aligned with the right of the parent, and the top is aligned with the top of the parent. For the second text view, this is the ID, text view 6. The width and the height are wrap contents. So the content or the width will be assigned to wrap the content of that view. Same thing with the height. The actual text we have in that text view is text view. the constraint bottom, the bottom of this view, we are assigning it, or we are aligning it to the bottom of the parent. The end, which is the right, is aligned with the end of the parent. The start, which is the left, is aligned with the start of the parent. And then the bottom or the top of this view is aligned with the bottom of the text view. So we are using the ID text view so we can uniquely identify that other text view. So this is the text view that we are aligning with. So we are assigning it to the bottom of that text view. Now, if you wanted to add another text view, you can actually copy this code. So I'm going to use Control-C and I'm going to insert it below this text view. Notice we have a red line here because we cannot have two views with the same ID. So I'm going to say, for example, this is text view 7. The width and the height of wrap content. The text we have is text view. Let's call it text view 2 so we can see the difference between them. The bottom is assigned with the bottom of the parent. The end is assigned with the end of the parent. The start is assigned with the start of the parent. And then it's in the top is assigned to the bottom of the text view. If I do not want to put it into the bottom of this text view, I want to put it under this text view, I can put, instead of text view, it will be text view 6. So if I go back to the design, you'll see I added another one, and then you will see that this text view was actually below text view 6, not below this text view. So again, you can make modifications directly in your XML code, or you can do it in the design in here as drag and drop, and you assign the values for the attributes directly in the attributes menu in here. Now for text views, we also have some other attributes that help me style that text in that text view. So if you go to the common attributes, you have the text appearance. You can actually change the font for that text. You can also change the size of that text. And you can also change, make it bold, italic, and even make it all uppercase or even all lower back to the original values. You can also change the text color. So if you go here and you can select one of the colors that you have. So for Android, we have some preset colors. You can select one of these colors, for example, and that will change the color for that text. So you'll see now we have it as purple, and this is the new color or the size we have for that text. There are other types of views and widgets we can add to our application. It's not only text views. We can also add, for example, these edittext views. So plain text, it will allow you to insert or allow the user to insert text in there. Password will mask the text that the user enters so that nobody can see it. Password numeric, when you click on there and you try to enter values, the only keyboard you will be able to see is the numeric keyboard. Email, phone, and other types of text entry values. You can also add buttons that will allow you to, or allow the user to interact with your application. So let's try to add, for example, a password or a password that is a numeric password. And let's put it in here. We need to assign the constraints. So I will be assigning the constraint of the bottom to align with the top of the hello world. And I will assign it to the middle of the screen. So right here and left here, and that will assign it in the middle horizontally. So now we have this edit text. It's called edit text 2. This is the ID. If we go to the text value, you will see it was added. And notice that when we added it, it did not have to go on top of this text view. We control the location using these constraints, the layout constraints. So it's to the top of the text view. It's aligning to the end of the parent and to the start of the parent. So the end of that view is aligned to the end of the parent, and the start is aligned to the start of that parent. Now, one of the attributes we have for that password or edit text is something called the hint. The hint is basically telling the user what they are expected to do in here. So we can say, please enter pass. So that will be displayed for the user. It's not a text they do not have to delete it. It will be behind the text, so that will just give them a hint on what they are expected to do. So let's run this application and see how it will look now. We will now need to uninstall this app, so Android will uninstall it and then reinstall it. And you'll see we have a hint here, please enter a pass. So if I try to click here, you'll notice since we used a numeric type of password, the keyboard that we get is only numerical keyboard. When you try to enter values, you'll see once you enter the number, it will be masked as a dot, so nobody can see it. So that's what we call a numeric password field or an edit text. Another attribute we can change in our widgets is the background. So if you click, for example, on this edit text, if you go to all attributes, one of the attributes will be the background. If you click on this browse, you can change the background for that text view. So you can select one of these pre-filled drawables, or you can go to color in the left here, and you can select one of these colors. So if you selected this blue, you will see that now the background for that text view is now blue. You can do that also for the root layout. So if you clicked on that root layout and you went to the background, you can actually change the background for your root layout. You can actually put a picture. So for example, we can put this IC launcher background, and you'll see that we have now a new background in here, which is an image. So you can change the background for your full screen, or you can change it for one or more of these widgets or views.